This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined today by Agriland editor Stella Meehan. Well, of course, this week was Budget Week, and we'll be starting with Budget 2026 as our first item. But just before we get there, this is of course also the week that some weanling exporters have boycotted marts due to their concerns over an apparent lack of dosing and vaccination of calves, which we've covered extensively over the last week or so. Agriland has not received any reports as of yet of any particular disruption to marts, and we will of course be continuing our coverage of this issue going forward. Roscommon Mart was one of the several marts that went ahead with weanling sales as planned this week, and the mart said this week that engagement on the issue between the exporters and Animal Health Ireland should have occurred sooner. And just before we move on to our budget coverage and staying on marts, Portumna Mart has confirmed that it has a new mart manager, with PJ Conroy taking the reins there, so best of luck to him. But now we'll get stuck into our budget coverage, and if you've been keeping an eye on Agriland, you'll know that we went to Blessington Mart in advance of the budget to hear what farmers' key asks were. Let's refresh our memories now on what the farmers had to say.
There is a problem with, handing over from one generation to another. In terms of the tax relief, something definitely could be done there. Or for people who don't have family of their own, in other words, they're handing over farms to nieces / nephews, whatever. There's definitely something has to be done there from a positive point of view, from the tax point of view.
Well, if you had, there is a lot of grants there for handling facilities and sheds. So, supports for younger people now, I would say they're not going to do the drudgery that was involved years ago. So, continued support for handling facilities, good sheds and good facilities, because a lot of people, if you're around the 100 euro mark, 150 euro mark, you probably just don't have the funds to put up the top-notch stuff.
And there will be a role, and there is a role at the moment for part-time, but isn't it a terrible thing? And I heard a senior individual in the Department of Agriculture talk about this not too long ago. Isn't it a terrible thing that we're talking about a part-time involvement in what is one of our biggest industries? If you think about it, there's only two industries in Ireland that earn us hard currency. One is food production and the other is tourism.
Well, Stella, there's obviously a lot of detail here, but what has Budget 2026 delivered for farmers?
Yes, Charles, I think I echo the sentiments of the country when I say that the budget has been a somewhat underwhelming affair. Is it fair to say this year? Not much change in general overall, and what some might call the squeezed middle, and they're probably a little worse off. But in terms of agriculture, I'll just give as brief a rundown of the headline items as I can. So if you don't mind just bearing with me. So the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, DAFM, has been allocated a total of €2.3 billion in the latest budget. Now, when we look at the breakdown, let's look at some of the items. There's €85 million in additional funding being provided for the rollout of the Bovine TB Action Plan, bringing its total to €157 million. Funding for acres will increase by €20 million. There is €88 million for TAM schemes. The Sheep Welfare Scheme will continue with funding again for the year ahead of €20 million, and €35 million is to be set aside for the World Food Programme. Now, other key items in the budget for agriculture are that the accelerated capital allowance for slurry storage will continue again next year. Funding of at least 50 million through various tillage schemes, and the overall allocations to fund livestock schemes will amount to €131 million. Now, a big issue before the budget was generational renewal. And how did the government do in addressing this in the budget? Well, agricultural relief will remain available on the current terms to farm families to facilitate succession and the intergenerational transfer of farms. Also, the 100% young trained farmers stamp duty relief will be extended by 4 years instead of the normal 3 years for such measures. Also, farm restructuring relief and a complementary stamp duty for farm consolidation relief have been extended by 4 years. Let's look at forestry. A total allocation of €93 million has been earmarked for the sector, which represents a 5.7% increase on the 2025 allocation. Agriculture Minister Martin Hayden also confirmed that he is allocating €56.6 million in budget 2026 to support and encourage organic production. There's also confirmed funding of €19.3 million for research and development next year, and financial supports totalling €8.25 million for the Knowledge Transfer Scheme programme. So some other elements then that affect farm families are that the carers allowance weekly income disregard has increased by €375 to €1,000 for a single person, and it has increased by €250 to €2,000 for a couple. The income limit for carers' benefit will also increase by €375 to €1,000 per week. The child support payment will increase by €16 to €78 for children aged 12 or over, and a weekly increase of €8 to €58 for children under the age of 12. The fuel allowance will also increase by €5 to €38 per week. And for the first time, families receiving the working family payment will qualify for the fuel allowance. The price of a box of 20 fags went up by €1, but the budget did not increase the excise on alcohol. So if you just managed to stay tuned for all of those are just some of the headline details, Charles.
And Stella, I suppose there was 2 standout issues that everyone agreed needed to be addressed. And you mentioned both of them there, but it's worth maybe zoning in on them. One of them was TB. So what was announced on that front?
Yes, Charles, looking more into the detail of the TB action plan, as I mentioned, over €157 million has been earmarked for it. That's an increase of €85 million this year. This funding boost is, quote, to ensure the effective implementation of the action plan. So the government said that the plan will allow it and farmers to work together to address the challenges of increased incidence of bovine TB in recent years. So it said that to ensure this funding is delivered efficiently, it'll be accompanied by a lean review of the bovine TB programme, aimed at improving efficiencies in the management and administration of the programme through enhanced streamlining of existing work processes at individual registered veterinary offices. So that's your RVO level. The funding allocation will allow DAFM to continue to undertake 9 million bovine TB tests on cattle. And just to make everyone aware, in case they weren't familiar, I suppose, with the stats, that in 2024, over 6,000 farms were affected by a bovine TB outbreak. Herd incidence for the devastating disease has increased to 6.04% in 2024, up from 4.31% in 2022. So that's worrying in one way. You could look at it, maybe there's more detection of the disease, which is a good thing. In another way, maybe it's more because the disease is more prevalent. The cost of running the national bovine TB programme stood at over €100 million in 2024. So that's an increase of 35% on the previous year. And up to the end of July this year, 61 million had been spent on that programme, Charles.
And the second main issue in the run-up to the budget for farmers was the tillage sector and the very considerable pressure on farmer margins there at the minute. Has Budget 2026 provided any relief for them, Stella?
So, Charles, a lot of growers had thought that specific and proactive action would be taken in budget 2026 to address what has widely been described as a crisis in the tillage sector due to mounting income pressure because of low prices and high costs. And of course, the weather always plays a factor when it comes to the tillage sector too. The Agriculture Minister announced a new tillage support scheme, albeit the reaction from farmers has been somewhat underwhelming. Minister Hayden said that at least €50 million would be allocated for this new tillage support scheme, as well as the protein aid scheme and the straw incorporation measure. So not a whole lot of, I suppose, big, massive headline funding such as with the TB scheme, but still some support there for the tillage sector. However, it's being described as massively underwhelming.
Well, we'll park our budget coverage there. And of course, you can read more detail on all these stories on our website and app. But we'll move on now and talk about farm renewables, in this case, biogas. A dairy farmer in County Galway has set up a biogas plant on his holding that he says will replace €30,000 in energy bills each year. Can you tell us more about this, Stella?
Yes, Charles. So just as Storm Amy was approaching at the end of last week, I went out to find out about a self-sustaining dairy farm in Dunmore, County Galway, where a biogas plant in the farmyard is covering the farm's annual energy costs. So Riverview Farm belongs to Brendan Gilday, and he opened up his yard so that other farmers and industry stakeholders could come and see the plant and equipment he had installed. Brendan is an organic pedigree dairy farmer with a 200 cow herd plus young stock followers on the outskirts of Dunmore town. He's a pioneering farmer and was one of the first to deploy robotic milking equipment in Ireland. There are now 3 generations of the Gilday family involved in the operation of the farm, with Brendan's father initially operating a sheep farm before selling off the sheep enterprise in the 1970s to buy 10 pedigree heifers at Castle Island Mart and begin dairying. The biogas plant at Riverview Farm was built with a 50% capital grant provided as part of the recently completed European Innovation Partnership Programme, that's EIP Agri, Small Biogas Demonstration Project, set up to develop farm-scale biogas plants in Ireland with the assistance from the Irish Bioenergy Association. So a 49 kilowatt biogas plant with 4,000 tonnes of feedstock input was designed and installed by Tank Storage Systems Limited in Kildare. Now, Tank Storage personnel were actually at the open day as well, answering a lot of questions. The tank has been generating about 24 to 28 kilowatts of electricity since it was commissioned a few months ago to meet its on-site needs on the farm, but it does have the potential to do more and maybe perhaps even sell back to the grid. The heat generated displaces about 5,000 litres of heating oil annually, and 3,000 tonnes of digestate is produced in solid and liquid form. So in terms of the carbon reduction of having a biogas plant on the farm, the Gildays are looking at about 202 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent avoided each year. So really sustainable. And there's pretty good returns there as well in terms of the energy it produces for the Gildays. So let's hear from Brendan's son James, who also works on the farm, about how the idea to install the biogas plant came about.
We're an organic dairy farm here in Dunmore, County Galway, milking 230 Holstein cows and pedigree Holstein cows. We're on a liquid milk contract. We have all year round, and so there in the spring of 2025 we commissioned a biogas plant to provide energy and to reduce our energy costs. So at the farm it's 49 kilowatt biogas plant. It's a combined heat and power unit, so we're producing electricity and heat. So that's all being produced off biomethane, which is the methane captured off the cow slurry, farmyard manure and a bit of waste siders that we have.
So that was James Gilday there, Charles from Dunmore, County Galway, describing to Agriland their positive move there on the farm to install a small-scale biogas plant to serve the energy needs of that dairy farm.
And just while we're on the topic of farm inputs, the deadline is approaching for farmers to declare fertiliser closing stocks, with the final date to do so falling on Wednesday of next week, that's October 15th. Even farmers that have no stock on hand should be making that declaration, so that's an important date to keep in mind. But moving right along, and the Spiritans religious order has confirmed that it intends to sell Rockwell Farm, which is located in the traditional Golden Vale region. What's the detail on this, Stella?
Yeah, so the sale of the County Tipperary farm, which at one time was estimated to cover an area in the region of 310 hectares, now that is 765 acres in old money, as they say, Charles, is one of a number of assets belonging to the Spiritans that may be sold to fund what they say is redress payments. In a statement to Agriland, the Congregation of the Holy Spirit, but we better know them as the Spiritans, stated that a commitment was made to those sexually abused by Spiritans that we would provide a clear update on the steps we are taking towards redress and healing for all those who suffered sexual abuse. The religious order's statement also went on to say, "We have been fully transparent about our financial position. The reality is we do not yet have the liquid resources required to begin issuing redress payments. Our plan, as part of the overall financial structuring of the province, is to create the required liquidity by selling Spiritan assets." The statement continued, "Progress is being made and Rockwell Farm will be the first of these properties to be sold, but this involves multiple legal, valuation and regulatory steps that simply take time to complete." So just a bit of history as well for our listeners. Charles, Rockwell College Farm was founded by the Holy Ghost Fathers in 1864. Rockwell Agricultural College had previously operated on the grounds of the farm, but that closed back in 2001. And Rockwell Farm's commercial dairy unit at one time had a milking platform spanning around 475 acres, which supported a dairy herd of about 620 cows, Charles.
Well, we'll move on now and revisit an issue that unfortunately keeps cropping up, and that's avian influenza, or bird flu. The disease was confirmed at a commercial poultry premise near Omagh in County Tyrone this week. Stella, what exactly do we know here and what has been the response?
Yeah, so basically, I'll go through the detail there again for you, Charles. You've pretty much mentioned it, but disease control measures were initiated by the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland following that suspect case of notifiable highly pathogenic avian influenza, otherwise known to you and I as bird flu. Now, the suspect case was at a commercial poultry premises near Omagh. The Chief Veterinary Officer for Northern Ireland, Brian Dooher, has taken the decision based on a number of factors, including the clinical signs and preliminary results provided by the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute based there in Northern Ireland. He took that decision to cull the flock as a result. Now, Minister for Agriculture in Northern Ireland, Andrew Moore, confirmed that the suspect notifiable avian influenza case was reported on Friday the 3rd of October, and initial results suggested the presence of that notifiable bird flu variant. He added that the CVO took the decision as a precautionary measure to apply appropriate disease control measures, including the humane culling of all poultry on the commercial premises site and the introduction of temporary control zones to mitigate for onward disease spread. So this suspect incursion of that avian influenza is a stark reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. The minister in Northern Ireland said it's imperative that all bird owners, from backyard hobbyists to commercial flock keepers with thousands of birds, that they adhere to all biosecurity measures to protect their flocks. Following that announcement in Northern Ireland, the Agriculture Minister in the Republic of Ireland, Martin Hayden, issued advice emphasising the need for all those with poultry and kept birds to implement the highest standards of biosecurity to protect their flocks from avian influenza. Minister Hayden said that as we enter into the winter months, the risk of bird flu becomes higher. He said his message for anybody who has poultry or kept birds is clear. please take strict precautions and exercise the highest standards of biosecurity to protect your flocks from the threat of bird flu and to protect the wider poultry sector in Ireland. He said that the department knows that the virus has been found this year in wild birds across Ireland and that biosecurity is the single most effective way to prevent the virus spreading from wild birds into poultry or commercial poultry flocks. And of course, he said that his department is continuously working with their counterparts in Northern Ireland to monitor the situation.
Well, finally this week, we'll come back to the EU-Mercosur trade agreement, which we covered on last week's podcast when European Commissioner for Trade Maros Šefčovič was in Ireland. When quizzed by Agriland last week on the safeguards for farmers that are included in the deal, the Commissioner stood by them, saying they were unprecedented and robust. And Stella, we have further updates on those safeguards this week.
Yeah, so in recent weeks, Charles, a lot has been happening on the EU front. And this week, the European Commission proposed a regulation to strengthen protections for EU farmers in the context of the EU-Mercosur Partnership Agreement. So it claims that the proposed safeguards deliver on the guarantees provided to EU farmers under the Mercosur EU legal proposal sent to EU member states by the Commission just back there in September of this year. According to the Commission, in practice, they provide an additional layer of certainty to EU farmers beyond the phase-in of targeted quotas that have been agreed with Mercosur for imports in sensitive sectors. The Commission stated that in the unlikely event of an unforeseen and harmful surge in imports from Mercosur or an undue decrease in prices for EU producers, swift and effective protections would kick into gear. Now, the Mercosur deal will allow 99,000 tonnes carcass weight of Mercosur beef, mainly from Brazil, but some other South American countries also, to enter the EU at a much reduced tariff rate of 7.5%. The quantity of beef under this quota will be phased in over a 5-year period. So the proposal this week laid down procedures to which it said will guarantee the timely and effective implementation of bilateral safeguard measures for agricultural products. It also includes specific provisions as regards certain sensitive agricultural products such as, beef, poultry, rice, honey, eggs, even garlic, ethanol and sugar, Charles. Now, the specific provisions for sensitive products include enhanced monitoring, clear triggers and rapid response. The European Commission said it will systematically monitor market trends regarding the imports of certain sensitive agricultural products under the agreement. Now, on the basis of these results, the Commission will send a report to the European Council and the European Parliament every 6 months, assessing the impacts of these imports on the EU markets. The Commission added that it will examine as a matter of priority cases where there is a surge of imports or a decrease in domestic prices concentrated in one or several member states. The Commission will then launch an investigation if import prices from Mercosur are at least 10% lower than prices of the same or competing EU products. And there is one of two things: a more than 10% increase in annual imports of a product from Mercosur under preferential terms, or a 10% decrease in the import prices of that given product from Mercosur countries, all compared to the preceding year. So if the investigation concludes that there is serious injury or even a threat of serious injury, the EU could temporarily withdraw tariff preferences on products causing injury. And I know when the Commissioner for Trade, Maros Šefčovič, was here last week, Charles, and he spoke to yourself, he very much stood by what he called the very strict Mercosur safeguards. So one quote from him was as follows, and I quote, "What we proposed is really unprecedented, based on the strongest legal instrument we have at our disposal, and this is a regulation. What it says in a nutshell is that we are putting into this very strict legal language a legal obligation, the precise method how we will monitor the trade flows in the agri-food sector between Mercosur and the EU." And indeed, you can view that video with Maros Šefčovič up on the Agriland website or on the phone app if you want to.
Well, that almost brings us to the end of today's podcast. Just before we go, we're just going to bring you two quick updates on the dairy sector. The latest results from the global dairy trade show a continued downward trajectory as the index figure decreased for the fourth consecutive time this week. Following the latest auction event this Tuesday, the index dropped by a further 1.6%. Meanwhile, the monthly purchase price index for Marnua for the month of September 2025 is 145.7, down from the previous month at 151.4. This reflects a price of 42.7 cent per litre, a decrease of 2 cent per litre from the August PPI. You can check out all the details on the latest PPI and GDT on our website and app. But that's where we'll leave it. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Stella and myself, take care.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.